know the first thing that I definitely want to say is we're both huge fans. I mean, we've been I've been a fan of Keel since 1984, and watching you come up through the ranks, through Cold Sweat and Medicine Wheel, and everything that you've done, man. It's really an honor to speak with you. Really, it is.
Well, happy to do it.
Well, first thing I wanted to ask is, how'd you get started in your music career? Like, in the early days with Keel, I know Ronnie had Steeler, and it kind of went into that, and I thought that was a great merge. I mean, to put that band together. How'd you guys get started in that?
Well, I moved out to Los Angeles in early 1984, and I was introduced to Ron by Mike Varney. Mike Varney had Shrapnel Records, and he had this series of unknown guitar players that he was releasing records with. And I had never met Mike face to face because I was living on the East Coast previous to that, but we had spoken several times, and I happened to run into him in Los Angeles after I moved here. And I was like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" And he introed me to Ron, and that's how I met Ron. Ron, of course, already had a pretty decent career going with Steeler, and already had released the Steeler record, and was a very big draw here in Southern California. He was selling out big clubs when he played, and had a big buzz on him, but he never got signed.
Right.
And so I think Ron felt that he needed a reboot.
Right.
And so, Steeler kind of had run its course. Steeler had been turned down by all these labels, so he felt he needed a fresh new start, and rebranded himself, so to speak, as Keel. And I happened to come along at that particular point in time, and that's how I got into Keel. I like to think also I was the right guy for the job. I had the chops, I had the ambition, the drive, and wherewithal to stick with it.
Right.
But that's how I was intro to Ron, was through Mike Ron.
That's cool to hear, because that especially that the first Lay Down the Law, when that came out, that's kind of where we started at. And yeah, you guys really, I mean, to this day, and it's really the truth, are one of my favorite bands to this day. And I still listen to the old stuff, the new stuff, and the songwriting. What you did was different, to me, over all those years. I mean, you had all the power, a lot of power in that band, but also the chops, like you said, and the melodies. You had the ability to play the heavy stuff, but you also had the the melodic side as well, and with the ballads and things like that. It was impressive.
Well, thank you for saying that. I did, I always thought Keel was a pretty well-rounded band, and some of that has to do with the various influences that we all were exposed to. Growing up, I was influenced by people as diverse as UFO, Pat Travers, AC/DC, Leonard Skinner, to softer stuff, Journey, Styx, Boston,
Right.
I think that's where a lot of the melodic stuff came from. I think Keel as a whole, Ron had a lot of different influences too. Now, don't forget, Ron wrote some of the real heavy stuff, and he also, wrote some of the ballads that, especially the early stuff, Princess of Illusion, and
Right.
Till Hell Freezes Over, I guess, was a quasi ballad. Ron had multiple influences too, and I think that's what you see come out in the music. A band that was influenced by a wide range of people. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And and from that first album, from Lay Down the Law up until going into Right to Rock, and that's really where you guys it seemed like you hit your stride right at that point. And that's where that's where a lot of the people that we knew, everybody started to pick up and say, "Hey, man, listen to these guys," and And that album right there too, "The Right to Rock," I mean, start to finish, is, I mean, to this day is still a, it's an epic album.
There are no keyboards on that record. It was all, full blast on that album. That's for sure. I don't think there was anything even close to a ballad on that record. That record happened pretty quickly. We had already recorded "Lay Down the Law" in June of '84, and by August of '84 we were recording "The Right to Rock." So literally 2 months after we finished recording our first album, we were back in the studio doing album number 2. And some songs, that's why there were 3 Gene Simmons cover songs on that record.
Right.
We simply did not have a lot of material left over from the "Lay Down the Law" stuff. Matter of fact, "The Right to Rock" was actually, written in the studio. I came up with that riff as a sound check while we were doing the recording for "Lay Down the Law."
Yeah, that's cool.
And that's why you had all those. You had 3 Gene Simmons songs on "The Right to Rock," basically because we needed material quick. Gene was only available for a certain period of time, so we needed to take advantage of that opportunity. So it was, back into the studio immediately and make the best of it.
That's a quick turnaround too.
Yeah, and "Tonight's Your Mine," which had a slightly different name on the "Lay Down the Law" album, was reused for "The Right to Rock." And we had the Stones covered.
Right.
So, that was definitely a full throttle record. On the Final Frontier, we stretched out our wings a little bit. Keyboards came into play. We had, some softer things on we had "Tears of Fire" and "Because the Night" on the Final Frontier. Still had some heavy stuff too.
Right.
But on that record, we definitely, we had more time to do it, and we definitely, were spreading our wings a little bit.
And you brought up the Final Frontier. I got a good story for you. I always tell everybody it's a good high school story. We were in art class, me and one of my real good friends, and we had the Walkmans back then. And the Final Frontier came out the night before, and I brought it in. I snuck it into school with the Walkman, and me and my buddy were listening to it in art class, and my Walkman got confiscated.
Uh-huh.
So we were telling there was a vice principal saying, we were listening to the weather to go golfing the next day. So but that album though right there is, right when it came out, had it next day, and we got to see you guys in Pittsburgh that year too, which was it was a treat, opening for Quiet Riot.
Yep, I remember that tour. Can't recall if it was Pittsburgh or Erie, where we, funny story, kind of a Spinal Tap story. Definitely Quiet Riot were past their prime a little bit, and their star was starting to fade a little bit, and so we were playing theaters with those guys, and one day we walked into an arena, like a big hockey arena.
Okay.
We thought, oh wow, we finally got a great venue here, good sized venue. We're not playing these theaters and stuff. We're playing an arena, right?
Right.
And then I look at the stage, and I thought the roadies must have been on acid or something, because they set the stage up the wrong way.
Right.
They set the stage up to face a little semicircle of seats that normally would be behind the stage.
Right.
So that was not a mistake.
Right.
That was supposed to be that way, and again, it was because of the diminishing, shall we say, audience for Quiet Riot on that tour. And I can't recall if that was Pittsburgh or Erie, because we played both places on that tour.
That was us. That was definitely Pittsburgh. Yep.
All right.
Yeah. What was? I can still see it to this day because when you guys hit the stage, Ronnie came out in a Joe Green Steeler jersey, and we talked to him last year. Actually, he did an acoustic show out here about that. But I remember when you guys hit the stage. I mean, you sounded great. The band was tight. It was heavy. So even with that small audience right there, facing the other way, it should have been the entire arena. I agree with you.
Well, it is, it is what it is. We always went out there with the intent to destroy. We were an opening act. We had to, we had to really kind of fight and claw our way, through the ranks. And that's, we always took a attitude of take no prisoners. Leave it all out on stage.
Right.
So I'm glad you guys picked up on that because one thing Keel never went soft on performances. We played through injuries, hangovers, flus, everything else.
Right.
Never canceled a show ever, man.
That's cool.
I think Ron's a pretty dynamic performer, and his passion has always been up there on stage, and we kind of followed him into battle, so to speak.
Right. And going into the next album, the self-titled with when United Nations was the first cut on the album, and I heard that, and that's an underrated, I think extremely underrated anthem, metal anthem.
Well, I agree with you. Although it did get us some buzz. We did a performance at the United Nations building. You can find that online. It was part of some Music Bridges the Gap kind of thing. I remember, and so we got to actually play that song. To tape, not live, but right from the actual stage where the United Nations, they have all those big, powerful meetings,
Right.
So, yeah, they went with a different single. They went with Somebody's Waiting as the first single. Maybe they thought it was more commercial. I'm not sure, but I wasn't involved in that decision-making process back then.
Right.
Yeah, we play United Nations once in a while, even to this day. So it's always been one of my favorite songs too.
That is, but I remember listening to it when I, back then it was, you couldn't get everything on CD, in a lot of the record shops that we were at. So I had that one on cassette, and I remember I walked right out of the mall, right into the car and put it in, and that was the first thing I heard. So that's an awesome tune. It really is.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. I always thought Keel as a band, we had some really good anthems, between The Right to Rock and Rock and Roll Animal and a few others. I think we did pretty good with that stuff.
And you and Brian J were excellent, guitarists together. I mean, you guys, fed well off of each other and always sounded good. Well,
the thing about Brian and I is that we are very different players. I mean, I'm from the East Coast. I'm definitely a blues-based guy. My influences were people I mentioned earlier, Pat Travers and Robin Trower, Ace Frehley, Joe Perry, Jeff Beck, more blues-based. Whereas Brian, being a West Coast guy, was immersed in this scene and, got to see people like George Lynch and Van Halen and Randy Rhoads and Jakey Lee and,
right.
Those kind of players. Those are more of his influence. So I think we really did make for a great team because we were different. You could tell our styles apart. And, I was the one that, was really totally into the double harmony stuff. That was, because of my influence of Thin Lizzy and Michael Schenker and Boston to a certain degree. All those guys had these gorgeous soaring double lead solos, and that was
right.
That was my thing, So I think together we made for a really unique guitar team. There are other guitar teams out there. Some of them, I can't tell them apart.
Right.
They're similar to each other.
Right, you're right.
Brian Brian and I were very different, and I think that worked to our advantage.
It definitely did. And when you went into after Keel and you went into Cold Sweat and Medicine Wheel, that was more great music. I mean, the Medicine Wheel CDs and the Cold Sweat CD definitely stands out. It was one of those that it wasn't Keel, and it sounded a lot like your influences. It was more like you said, like a little more bluesy, but it was still the good hard rocking, and a lot of good songs on that one too. Is well written.
Well, thank you. I'm very proud of the Cold Sweat record. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into making that. You guys might know the history. There's Oni Logan was our first singer. I discovered him in Florida doing drywall, and moved him out to L.A. He lived with me for the better part of the year, but he left us. He left the band actually the day we started setting up our gear in the studio.
Oh man!
To record our record, and that's a true story. It was a shitty move at the time. We're all friends now. I'm buddies with George Lynch. We hang out with each other. Oni's been, we've kissed and made up. Really, he probably did me a favor in the long run, but at the time it wasn't apparent.
Right.
But anyways, very proud of the Cold Sweat record. I agree with you. There's some great songs on there. Good, everybody in the band was a great player. You heard not only my influences, but the influences of the other guys that were in the band too, especially on the vocal side.
Right.
Unfortunately, that album kind of came and went pretty quickly. It was around the time that the grunge movement was starting to happen, and it was kind of the tail end of the commercial hard rock scene. And, we were on a label that really wasn't known for being a good rock label.
Right.
MCA Records. So, just a combination of things with that band, it's just the timing wasn't right. And, we were like one and done. one and done. So, Medicine Wheel started in '94, I think it was, a couple years after the demise of Cold Sweat.
Right.
And those are three vastly different records with three different singers, as you guys know.
Right.
The second album definitely, you heard the grunge influence of some of the other guys in the band that were listening to Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. And so our singer at the time, Keith St. John, who now does the Montrose stuff, great singer, but he was just influenced by different people. He was definitely into Chris Cornell and those guys, and you heard that in the material that came out on that record. Whereas the first Medicine Wheel album was definitely more commercial hard rock, and the third one was kind of a balance of the first two.
Right.
So I'm proud of all those records. The Medicine Wheel stuff was on independent records. We didn't get major label deals on those, although we did go to Japan to support First Things First, the first album.
Right.
But again, those albums kind of came out during the era that the grunge movement was happening, and it was a little tougher for commercial hard rock bands at that time to get noticed or to get traction, I should say.
Right. And too bad that any of those didn't come out like in the mid '80s. I mean, those were really, I mean, the great cult status records, really. Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, I'm proud to be associated with them. They're all kind of part of my musical DNA, and they kind of capture moments in time. That's what you have to look at, America.
Right. Okay. And I've always thought your songwriting, was great on everything that that you did. It was something that I liked some of the styles. Like you were talking about the varying styles. Some of the the heavier stuff, the melodic stuff, and the and the different styles, like you said, some of the grunge, a little bit on the Medicine Wheel later on. So it was really good stuff. You're a great songwriter, man.
Well, thank you. You know, the apple don't fall very far from the tree. That's the expression I use a lot.
Right.
You know, you know, definitely influenced by, you know, my songwriting. I guess I hear a lot of AC/DC in my riffs. I hear a lot of Judas Priest in my riffs when I kind of take a step back, you know.
Right.
Those two bands obviously were, you know, really paramount in the formation of my musical soul, you know.
Right.
Totally. Heavily influenced by those guys. And a few others, you know, Zeppelin, of course, Aerosmith.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody my age was influenced by Kiss somewhat. So from that power chord stuff, open power chord stuff, very reminiscent to, you know, the Kiss Alive era, for sure.
That's all. I was gonna say that's all good stuff. I mean, you know, Boston, Kiss. And those are Boston. I think is a band that really should, you know, get a lot more than what they've gotten. I mean, they're big, but they should be, you know, really considered one of the best bands of all time.
Well, I think that they were one of the most original bands of all time. Certainly from, you know, a couple different standpoints. You know, from the production standpoint, you know, the guitar sound and the layers, and
right.
You know, those guys. We're one of the first bands, you know, to have these soaring vocals with dual guitar harmonies. You know, the AC/DC, Thin Lizzy had some of that too,
right.
But Boston was much more commercial. You know, they had all the radio hits. Thin Lizzy had, you know, one major radio hit,
right.
Where, you know, Boston had like 7 or 8. You know,
right,
so,
right.
But anyways, I take any compliment about my writing to heart. You know, it's tough to, you know, you always want to try to be as original as possible, and that's tough to do when you're leaning on the shoulders of giants, you know.
Right, right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You know, you deserve it. I mean, you know, the accolades, you know, especially from the, you know, the fans who've been listening for a long time. You know, we appreciate, you know, the style and the heart that you convey in your music, you know, to us is very, very, very appreciated.
Well, again, I feel lucky that I came up when I did, and you know, Keel was part of this big, huge scene, and you know, the LA metal scene, and you know, you're never going to have that kind of scene again for sure. You know, those days have come and gone. So we were, you know, I don't know, lucky is the right word, but, you know, I guess maybe timing does play a part in some things, you know.
Right.
Like we were part of that wave, you know. It's kind of like waves of an ocean, you know. The waves keep coming in. And here in LA back in the 80s, you know, they were just waves and waves and waves of bands, you know, getting signed, you know.
Right.
Probably 30 bands from LA got signed in a 3-4 year period, you know.
Right. That was the best time in music, at least in my eyes, anyway. It definitely was.
Well, in my eyes too. Although, right. You know, I grew up listening to bands from the 70s, so the argument could also be made the 70s were the most fertile time for music, you know.
Right, right. That was such a good blend of eras too. I mean, the 70s and how the 80s were influenced by it. You know, just so many good sounds. You know, coming out of both eras. You're right.
Well, I wish we could turn back time and relive those days, but they're distant memories right now.
I agree. How about so many, you know, so many other things? And we, you know, take away, you know, we talked about the music and everything. How about, you know, the, you know, seeing you in Wayne's World and everything, and you guys just did the 25th anniversary? Yeah,
it was the 25th anniversary of the release of Wayne's World.
Right.
It came out on Valentine's Day, 1992. So yeah, hard to believe 25 years. It was filmed in the summer of 91, but it didn't release till February of 92. So yeah, another kind of feather in the cap. You know, that came through my relationship with Penelope Spheris, who directed Wayne's World 1.
Right.
She directed the Keel video, Somebody's Waiting. No, not Somebody's Waiting. Rock and Roll Outlaw. What am I saying?
Oh, that's cool.
She did Rock and Roll Outlaw. We had a song on that soundtrack that was from the movie Dudes, and that's how I got the Wayne's World gig, was staying in touch with her, and happened to call her at the right time.
That was cool to see you in that movie too. I mean, we knew right away. Hey, that's Marc Ferrari.
Yeah, we're also in Wayne's World 2, not quite as much in Wayne's World 2, but we are in that a little bit. And I got to do some TV stuff too. I did some, background stuff on some TV shows. As a result of that, I was getting called, to be the guitar player in the band,
Right.
Stand around and, do nothing all day and get paid for it.
Not too bad a gig, huh?
Yeah, well, they're actually pretty boring. Even the film stuff's pretty boring. You sit around most of the day while they're setting up shots or redoing this or redoing that, and then it's go time, and then it's, a few minutes of that, and then it's, get lost for an hour while we reset the lights,
Right. Standing around. And the big thing that I thought was really great is right now your book, Don't Dilly Dally Silly Sally.
Well, it's actually my second book.
Second book, okay.
Yeah. Back in 2002, I had a book called Rockstar 101, which is a music reference book. It's kind of a how-to book. It really was designed to share the knowledge that I gained being in a band, and being in a band is like being in a business, with other people. So there've been a lot of music kind of business books written, but none of them written by an actual rock and roller, somebody that actually went on the road or, played Madison Square Garden, went from the garage to the garden, so to speak.
Right.
So that book came out, like I said, almost 15 years ago. This new one just came out in February, and it's a children's book, and it was inspired by my daughter, who is most definitely a dilly-dallyer, and when she was very young, she was 4 or 5 years old, it was a little frustrating for us because we were always trying to get her out the door on time for things, and we kept missing things because of our lateness, and one day I just kind of blurted out, "Don't dilly-dally, silly Sally," and that phrase kind of stuck with me, and years later I came back and I kind of finished a little outline that I had started, about a girl that always runs late.
Right.
So yeah, it just got published, like I said, 3-4 months ago, and so I'm still kind of working that one. I've done a number of TV interviews for that. I've done a number of book signings, and a couple more signings here in Southern California next month.
Right.
And whether it leads to more success in the children's book world, I don't know, but it was an experience getting this one out, this one done and out the door, so to speak.
That's great to see.
Any of the listeners are interested in the book, they can go to marcferrari.com and order the book from my website.
Awesome. That's great to that you're doing that right now. I mean, it's how well does it do with
I guess a lot of people wouldn't think a heavy metal guy had a children's book in him, but some of us do, I guess.
Hey, that's what what you have coming out of your heart. It's what your soul's about.
Well, it's another form of expression. The written page is similar to to a song. Writing a book is somewhat similar to writing a song, although writing a song is shorter process normally, because writing a book is it's depending what type of book you're writing, it could be hundreds of pages. My reference book was over 100 pages. The children's book is not. It's geared towards the 3 to 8-year-olds, and so it's a pretty quick read, which a lot of those children's books are.
That's cool. When you do like a book signing, say for the new book and everything, do you get a lot of kids that come up and to meet you and talk about it?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of everything. I've had some Keel fans show up out of curiosity,
Right.
and yes, get the kids that come in with mom and dad, and I've had grandparents. I've sold books to grandparents for their grandkids. I've sold books to adults by themselves as gag gifts for other adults who are dilly-dalliers. A little bit of everything.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. How about as far as music career? I mean, do you have anything that you're working on now that's coming up that you want to get out there to everybody?
Well, I'm not involved with any other musical thing outside of Keel. I get asked to do things, but I haven't really felt that need. As far as recording goes, that's it for me. It's just whatever Keel's doing. You guys may know that I started a pretty successful business involved with film and TV music. I've been doing that on and off for 20 years.
Right.
More than 20 years, actually. Closer to 25. And I sold my business to Universal in 2007. And I worked for them for 5 years. And I still produce music for them, but I'm not a full-time guy at Universal anymore. I decided not to renew my employment agreement and figure out what the next move is here. So I have my toes in the water now with some music tech stuff. I've joined a couple of angel investment groups, and it's kind of like Shark Tank for real.
Right.
So I have that to keep me busy. I still have some production work to my film and TV clients. It keeps me somewhat busy, and I'm also living my life. I'm an avid outdoor guy, so I'm always hiking and backpacking, and I get to do some of that. Enjoy the fruits of my labor, so to speak.
Right. That's a very, very productive career, I'd have to say.
Well, I hope it's not completely over. Keel actually will be on the Monsters of Rock cruise in 2018. If you guys are interested in seeing Keel, that's our only gig so far, although there may be some other things coming up for us to do. You never know.
I'd like to...
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'd definitely like to, to be on that cruise. I knew you guys were playing it. I heard that announced a little while ago, and boy, I've never been on one, so it'd be interesting to do that. That's for sure.
They're a lot of fun. It's a lot of, I wouldn't call it a relaxing cruise, because you got all this energy going on and music going on and people getting crazy.
Right.
But it's a great way to see a bunch of bands all at the same time and interface with the bands. Everybody's kind of pretty approachable.
Right.
Have some fun letting loose while you're at it.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to look into that and see about going this year. Or next year. I'd like to check that out. Being a fan and everything for a while.
I think you should go.
Well, how about any last words, Mark? I mean, anything else that you want to get out there, and any word that we can spread for you?
Well, I just wanted to say thanks to all the fans of commercial hard rock who are still out there buying CDs, hopefully not stealing them from MP3 sites, but buying CDs and going to concerts and supporting bands of our generation, because it does help. And I'm hoping to stay at this for a good while longer. Keel got back together in 2009, which was our 25-year anniversary, and although we haven't been active the last couple of years, we are hoping to fire back up in 2018. So stay tuned.
We're definitely looking forward to it. And in conclusion here, I just wanted to tell everybody that's listening in is MarcFerrari.com. Don't dilly-dally, silly Sally. You can order it on his website. And we want to thank you for not only for for the interview, but also for everything that that you've put out there and done for us as fans. I mean, we're music fans, and we tie memories back to the music of Keel and Cold Sweat, Medicine Wheel, and we really appreciate you as an artist, Mark. I mean, it really is a thrill to speak with you, and thank you for everything that you've done.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I hope to do more.
We're looking forward to it. We'll see you on that rock cruise. I got to get out there and see that one this time.
I think you ought to do it. There's no time like the present.
Right. Right. Totally agreed. All right, Mark. Thanks for taking some time to chat with us, and I wish you the best on everything. Just keep rocking, man, because we're listening. We'll get the word out for you.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
All right, bye.
We'll see you. Bye bye.